Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Throwing Partners podcast. It's Kirby and Joseph here, coming to you on a Monday night. And Joe, it's been 3 weeks since we have had a podcast. I am super excited to be back. I have missed doing this on Mondays with you. I am ready to get started and listen to you talk about the Astros over the last 3 weeks. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, so let's get after it.
Drive into left. At the wall. It's gone. Tie game.
Yep. So it's been 3 weeks or 23 games, and the last time I left y'all, we were coming up on a stretch of games where the Astros were really gonna prove if they were pretenders or contenders. They had three straight series against potential playoff matchups. One series, a four-game series with the Baltimore Orioles, uh, a series against the Philadelphia Phillies in 3 games, and then four games against the Kansas City Royals. And the Astros, pretty much took care of business during that series. I think that they proved that they are a legit contender this season. Now there were games in that series, and in both of the Phillies and the Orioles series that really could have, one or two plays could have changed the outlook of the series. But overall, I think they did pretty well. In that Baltimore series, they split 2 games out of the 4 games, losing the middle 2 games of those series, um, where each of those games was really decided by one or two plays. You've got the Anthony Santander home run against Brian Abreu in that first game. And you got to just tip your cap to Santander. He hit a pitch that really should not be hit out of any ballpark, and he just went up and elevated and crushed it. And then you've got the misplay by John Singleton that led to the Jackson Holiday RBI double, that put the Orioles past the Astros 3-2 in that third game of the series. And that was just really unfortunate. I mean, the Astros defense has kind of been killing them over these last couple of weeks. Um, the games that they have lost have been due to some pretty poor defense. So that's been pretty frustrating to watch because the Astros' dominant defense has been kind of one of the staples over this golden era, and to see it kind of dwindle down over the last 2 seasons has been really disappointing. Um, but it is what it is. They lost those middle 2 games, but would end up evening up the series in that last game. And then moving on to the Phillies series, they would lose the first game, and as I mentioned, a couple of these games could have been decided by one or two plays. This Phillies, the opening game of that series, it was 3-2 in 10. Bryce Harper hit a walk-off single, and it was just a really hard-fought game. Unfortunately, the Astros offense did not want to do anything, um, and I believe they left 10 men on base during that series or during that game. Excuse me. So it was just bad night for them offensively, and they continue to struggle with runners in scoring position. Um, I think they're pretty much middle of the road in the league with runners in scoring position. But it honestly feels like they are a lot worse because when they do get guys on base, and they do a lot, they have a hard time converting those on base points into runs, and it's really frustrating to watch on a night in night out basis. And we're kind of going to get into that a little bit later on in the podcast, talking about situational hitting and focusing on one of these games against the Oakland Athletics that the Astros had recently. But after that Phillies series, the Astros would come home and play the Kansas City Royals for 4, and they would sweep that series. A lot of people had been saying that the Kansas City Royals were probably going to be the toughest matchup for the Astros, and the Astros dominated that series against them. They won 6-3, 3-2, 5-2, and 7-2. And they pretty much handled their business every game that series. I mean, they won the series, so obviously. And then the Astros did something that they have continuously done since 2016, and that is get swept by the Cincinnati Reds, because that is the last time the Astros have beaten the Cincinnati Reds, was 2016. Luckily for the Astros, they have been to 7 straight ALCSs since the last time they beat the Reds, so hopefully they can make it an 8th straight ALCS as they continue to lose to the Cincinnati Reds. Honestly, if I were any other team in the league, I would just mimic what the Cincinnati Reds do because they somehow have the Astros number. Um, the Astros have been owned by the Cincinnati Reds during their entire golden era, which I didn't really think I could say about a team until hearing some of the crazy things about how we've played against them. You take the 2019 Astros, one of the best teams of all time, and they got swept by the Cincinnati Reds. It's kind of insane when you really think about it because the Astros have put up some very good teams, obviously over these last 8 years, and the fact that they have not beat the Reds once is just really shocking to me. And then the Astros would have another tough series. They would face the Arizona Diamondbacks at Minute Maid Park. The Arizona Diamondbacks were coming into that series the hottest team in baseball. And the Astros would win that series. They would take the first 2 games of that series, 8-0, shutting the Arizona Diamondbacks offense down, which had been one of the most potent offenses in baseball up to that point, and then winning the second game of that series 11-5. Now, unfortunately, they did lose that last game of the series, and Justin Verlander had probably one of the worst starts of his career. And a lot of people kind of thought that might be the nail in the coffin for his role as a starter in an Astros uniform, because his start was that bad. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but he pitched okay in his next start, which was actually this Saturday. He was facing the Los Angeles Angels, so take that with a grain of salt. And I think there are some real question marks as to whether or not he's going to be on the postseason roster or in the postseason rotation. I think that if Spencer Arrighetti pitches well in these potentially last 2 starts, then I think that there's not really a way to fit Verlander back in that rotation at all. I really wouldn't see it. I think the only way that he is in that rotation is if it's you're pitching him off of name recognition, and I really don't think that's a great way to win a postseason series, if I'm being honest, because he has not been that great this year. Before he went on the IL, he hadn't had a bad start. He had maybe one bad start before he got sent to the IL, but every start since has not been great. They haven't all been bad, but there's nothing that's told me that this is Justin Verlander of old. This is Justin Verlander of old because he is just aging now, and I don't know if we're ever going to see, 2022 Justin Verlander or 2019 Justin Verlander ever again, which is really unfortunate because he's one of the greatest pitchers this game has ever seen, and it's really sad to see him go out this way. Now, I hope he makes me eat my words. I think he's going to at least get another 2 starts to end the season. So, maybe we see him come out and absolutely dominate in those last 2 starts, and he's able to build on that for a potential postseason run. But we'll see. There's 2 weeks left, so he's got some work to do. And so moving on from that Arizona Diamondbacks series, the Astros would then drop a series to the Oakland Athletics. And this has kind of been a staple of the Astros since they started this golden era. It's, get to where you are near the end of the season and then absolutely crumble against some really bad teams, some below 500 teams, or, some teams that, should be one of the worst in the league. And that's kind of what they did playing the Reds and the A's, although the A's have been one of the best teams in baseball since the All-Star break. So that was no cupcake series. And unfortunately, they got the better of the Astros. One of those games, as I mentioned, we will talk about a little bit more in depth, which was that first game of the series, which ended in a 4-3 loss in 12 innings because the Astros cannot hit in Manfred Ball extra inning baseball. But moving past that athletic series for a minute, the Astros would then go on to Los Angeles and face the Angels, and they would sweep that series. They swept a 3-game series against the Angels, winning 5-3, 5-3, and 6-4. which is where we are at today. They are currently 4.5 games up on the Seattle Mariners, who have an off day today, and we are about to start a series with the San Diego Padres in about a minute, actually. So this is also a very big series because, like the Diamondbacks, the San Diego Padres have been one of the best teams in baseball since the All-Star break, relying on a very high-powered offense and a really good starting rotation. So this is going to be a good matchup. We've got Yu Darvish facing off against Spencer Arrighetti tonight. I'm hoping to see a bounce back from Arrighetti because I believe his last start, it might not be his last start, but one of his last starts was a pretty bad start where he did not get out of the first inning, which was one of those games against the Reds where they lost 12-5. He gave up 9 runs in the first inning. Only 3 of those were earned, but he did not have his command, and none of his pitches were working the way that he likes them to. The defense, as I mentioned before, which has been sputtering as of late, did not help him because Jeremy Pena made a costly error in the first. And he's also been playing some really bad defensive baseball as of late. But again, not going to go too much into it. The Astros play the Padres this series, the Angels next, and then for their final home series of the year, they face the Seattle Mariners, which could be probably one of the biggest series of the season. And then after that, they go to Cleveland, which, depending on how Cleveland finishes out this next week and a half, could be a really big series in terms of positioning for the postseason. That series could decide the number 2 seed in the AL, which could subsequently determine who gets a bye and who has to use their top 2 or 3 pitchers in an AL wildcard series matchup against whoever. So 3 really big series to finish off the season. They have 4 series left. Obviously, they got to take care of the Angels, but they have 3 series to sharpen up and really get ready for that postseason grind. And they've got some good tests in front of them with the Padres, Mariners, and Guardians coming up. So I really look forward to seeing how they finish out the season against them.
Well, that was a great Astros update, Joe. I'm not going to talk that much about the Braves because it hasn't, quite frankly, been that great. It's been okay. The Mets just won, so now I'm a little irritated because the Braves are getting absolutely thumped by the Dodgers, which is going to put them 1 game out of that final wild card spot. Anyway, moving on. So since we last talked, the Braves are 10-8. The offense has been just pathetic. It hasn't been great. It hasn't been great all season. We've been dealing with the same things all year. They get a guy on, let's say like a double to lead off the inning, and then he doesn't score. Maybe they hit a leadoff triple, and then the guy takes a walk, and guess what? They get a pop out, and they ground into a double play. It's just repetitive. Every single game, you can tell exactly what's going to happen. The offense has just been atrocious. I don't know what it's going to take to fix that. Obviously, they have been injury-ridden all year, but boy, is it frustrating to watch. They've had one guy since our last podcast that's been playing well, and that's Matt Olson. He's had a 146 WRC plus, which has been great. That is more like vintage Matt Olson that we, not quite what we saw last year, but pretty close. The pitching staff has still been fantastic. Between Sale and Morton and Schwelly, they've all had 4 starts apiece. Sale has had a .72 ERA in those starts. Morton has actually had a 2.7 ERA. He has looked really good in his last few starts. And Spencer Schwellenbach has had a 2.95 ERA in his last 4 starts. All of them have racked up a ton of Ks. It's been really nice to see. We saw Raisel Iglesias go on a really nice run up until yesterday when he got blown up in the 9th. It was really disappointing to see because he had pretty much been unhittable and actually on a historic streak without giving up an earned run. So that was really hard to see, Joe, because last night it was a 2-2 game with 2 outs on the top of the 9th, runner on base, and they decided to walk Ohtani, and then the wheels fall off, and in the worst way possible. It went from 2-2 to 9-2 or 10-2, whatever it was, just ridiculous. And today it's even worse. So yeah, I'm irritated to say the least, but you know what? They still have 4 whole series to go through after this. We're going to talk about that in a little while because I'm going to go over the NL wild card race to finish out the year. Joe Jimenez has also been fantastic this year. He's actually had 18 Ks and 11 innings since our last pod, which is just awesome. Between him and Iggy at the back end, they're good. Their whole pitching staff is still really solid. Max Fried has also been pretty good. He threw a quality start tonight, even though it was kind of shaky. I mean, 6 runs, 3 innings, or I'm sorry, 6 innings, 3 runs. I mean, that puts you in position to win every single game. But unfortunately, they're going to get shut out for like the 14th time this year, which is just wild considering they didn't get shut out like after mid-May last year. So anyway, just it sucks right now, but like I said, we've still got 4 series to play, and 2 of them are against teams that aren't very good. But I'll get there in a little while. Now, Joe, I mentioned how good Chris Sale has been in his last 4 starts since we last talked. I want to talk for just a minute about how good Chris Sale has been this season. Okay. First of all, I was told that Chris Sale was washed up, that Chris Sale was going to be no good, and that Chris Sale was going to be like a 4 or 5 starter. Okay. Chris Sale currently leads the MLB Triple Crown right now for pitching. He's got a 2.35 ERA. He's got 17 wins. He's got 219 Ks. That is the best across baseball, not just the National League. He's also got a 2.02 FIP. He's had 28 starts. He's thrown 172 and 2/3 innings, and he's got a 6.4 FWAR. Now, let me just say this too, Joe. This is what impresses me the most, especially in today's game. He's also given up the least amount of home runs among qualified starting pitchers with 8. Okay, Christopher Sanchez is 9. Framber Valdez is actually third with 11. And as we both know, both of those pitchers are very good. So for Chris Sale, we've only given up 8 home runs in 172 innings. To me, that is absolutely incredible considering we live in a game of home runs. So shout out to Chris Sale. He has been phenomenal this year. It has been a joy watching him. My birthday is in a few weeks, and my only wish is that somebody gets me a home white Chris Sale jersey. So that would really look nice in my closet next to my other Braves jerseys. Size large, by the way. So anyway, what I wanted to say, though, is he is obviously more than likely, it's a 99% chance he is going to win his very first Cy Young in a Braves uniform this year. But there's something else that I want fans to keep in mind here, Joe. The NL MVP race it's kind of ugly, to say the least, because there's no Ronald Acuna at the top. There's no Mookie Betts at the top. Some of the other guys that have been really solid the last few seasons have just not been there. This year, the top is Francisco Lindor with a 7.4 FWAR. Second place is Shohei Ohtani with a 7 FWAR, who, in my opinion, is probably going to win it just because the national media loves him. And not to mention, more than likely, he's going to go 50-50. Okay? But if you remember what I just said, Chris Sale is actually third in the National League with 6.4 FWAR. I shared this with you, Joe, the other day. When Chris Sale starts, the Braves are 21-7. I don't know what these stats look like when Lindor and Ohtani are playing, and when they're not, because they pretty much play every day. But if a team has won 21 games because of you, to me, that is extremely valuable. Now, I don't know if Chris Sale is going to be a top 3 MVP finisher or not, but if you're looking at just statistics like I just showed you, he's there. Because the next guy after him is Ellie De La Cruz with a 6.2 FWAR, and then it kind of falls off the table, and I think it's Ketel Marte after that. And he doesn't even have close to a 6 FWAR. So a part of me thinks that there is actually a chance where Chris Sale ends up in that top 3 MVP conversation. I don't think he is the MVP, but I think it's worth talking about. Well, I mean, and here's my thing too, Joe. More than likely, he's going to have 3 more starts. He's going to have 1 more this week. He's going to start against the Mets. And then I think if necessary, he's going to pitch probably that last game of the season against the Royals. If Chris Sale goes out and wins another 3 games, and that gives him 20 wins, and let's say he's got 245 to 250 strikeouts, and a 7.5 F4, it's going to be hard to not put him on that top 3 MVP mantle with the other two. Because I don't know in these last 4 series if Ohtani and Lindor are going to add another full F4 to their criteria this season. But it's gonna be interesting to watch. I love Francisco Lindor. He is one of my favorite players. But I don't think that he wins it. I think they give it to Ohtani, especially if he ends up going 50-50. It's a very interesting season that we've had so far in the National League. Offense has been so down overall, especially in the National League. And it really sucks too that all of the quote unquote fantastic players have been in the American League this year, because you want to see some of that well spread a little bit and be in the National League as well. So that's all I pretty much have to say about that. And then I wanted to talk a little bit, Joe, before we get into the NL wildcard race, about my favorite Braves player, Ozzy Albies. Okay, Ozzy is going to begin a rehab assignment soon. He hopes to rejoin the team this weekend in Miami, which is all fine and dandy. Now, he is having some trouble swinging the bat left-handed, which, in my opinion, is not that big a deal because he is actually not a good hitter right-handed. He is an elite hitter right-handed. If you've ever looked at his stats right-handed, he is like a top 10 player of all time right-handed. He is that good. Like his OPS is like 1 dot something. He is that good from the right side. And there have been times throughout his career where lots of fans have asked, like, hey, why doesn't he go right-handed full time? Because he is that good. Now, let me say this, Joe. His numbers have been down this year. He's got a 98 WRC plus. His defense is bad, especially his range, for somebody who's quick, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And his arm is awful. He's had shoulder issues. He's had shoulder surgery. His arm is god awful. Before he got hurt, he had cost the Braves several outs because he couldn't turn the double play, which really sucks to see because, like I said, this is my favorite Braves player. I love this guy. I have met him. He is an incredible human. He is extremely happy. He is everything that you wanted in a hero, literally. But here's my hot take, Joe. I don't know that they want Ozzy to come back right now. And I say that because of this, okay? Whit Merrifield has played Gold Glove caliber defense for the most part, with the exception of a couple blunders, at second base. He's got a great arm at second base. He's got close to elite speed on the bases. He also draws a ton of walks to get himself on base. With Ozzy's numbers being down, Joe, I don't know that he is any more valuable coming back than what Whit Merrifield is. The Braves have won games this year with their pitching and their defense. They have not won them with the offense. If they are going to bring Ozzy back and take a step back defensively, then he better be bringing a step up offensively. And if he's not going to do that, Joe, there's no reason for him to come back. Take your time and fully heal. Maybe they make it to October, maybe they don't, or maybe he actually gets a full offseason to recover. But it was really odd the other day when Snicker and Ozzy kind of had different views on where he was at in his rehab, and Snicker really didn't know what was going on with Ozzy. Just a very strange situation, which tells me that they are kind of putting what he is doing on the back burner because they like what Whit is doing and they like what he's bringing to him right now because of what he does defensively and on the base paths. I don't know what happens to Whit when Ozzy comes back. I don't think he moves to third because he's not a third baseman. And honestly, Urshela has played really good defense over there for the most part. I don't think he should play left field either. Because quite frankly, Ramon Laureano has been a very solid player with like a 115 or greater WRC plus. He also has really good tools. He's got a phenomenal arm. He's got good speed on the bases. He's an athlete. Yep. But I don't know what happens with Whit, but it's going to be unfortunate to see him go because he does so many good tools to them. but I don't think that I don't think they are in a rush to get Ozzy back. And quite frankly, I don't know that they want him back starting with how Witt has played overall. Now, granted, he has no power, but he makes things happen. He is so fast. He makes things happen. He can put a bunt down. He can just he has, I don't know. And to me, Joe, he has that dog in him where, like, if I need somebody to come up and lay a bunt down and get on base to fire up the boys and start a rally, it's probably going to be Witt. But I really don't think that they necessarily want Ozzy back right now, which is wild to say that. But so far this year, he really hasn't been that valuable. So that's kind of my hot take on it. But anyway, moving on, Joe. The NL wildcard race. Okay, every team has 4 series left. There's 4 teams that want 3 spots. You've got the Padres, the Diamondbacks, the Mets, and the Braves. Okay. As of tonight, the Braves are taking an L, serious L. They're going to be 1 game out of the last wild card spot with the Mets in front of them. Okay. Let me tell you how the last 4 series go for each team. The Padres are playing Houston right now. We've already established that. They play 3 in Houston, or 3 against Houston. They play 3 at home against the White Sox. Then they play 3 in LA, and they play 3 in Arizona. That's how they finish out their season. Okay. So they play 3 really good teams, and then the historically horrible White Sox. All right. We may even talk about that in a little bit because it irritates me how bad they are. Okay. Anyway, then you've got the Diamondbacks, who currently hold the 2nd wild card spot. They play 3 at Colorado. They play 4 at Milwaukee. They play 3 versus San Francisco at home, and then 3 against San Diego at home. Colorado's not good, and they're playing at Colorado. San Francisco's not good, and they play them at home. That's a pretty easy route to finish out the year. Then you've got the Mets. The Mets are playing 3 versus Washington, who they beat tonight in Game 1. They are playing 4 against Philly coming up, which is going to be really interesting to see how that goes because Philly could actually clinch pretty soon with that. Then they play 3 in Atlanta against the Braves, which is going to be the Braves' biggest 3 games of the year. And then they play 3 at Milwaukee. So their last 10 games are very difficult and against postseason teams or potential postseason teams, depending on if the Braves make it or not. And then you've got the Braves. Starting tomorrow, they play 3 against Cincinnati, 3 against Miami, 3 against the Mets, and 3 against Kansas City at home. Cincinnati is not great, but the Braves seem to play bad against bad teams. They have 3 against Miami, and they seem to play bad against bad teams this year. I don't know what it is. They've actually played exceptionally well against good teams, but not against bad teams. But I don't know how to explain that one. But overall, the Braves actually have probably the easiest schedule left. Do they take advantage of that? Probably not, to be honest. I don't even know if this team makes the postseason at this point. I can see them, dropping 2 out of 3 in Cincinnati. I can see them dropping 1 stupid game in Miami. And then they play the Mets and Kansas City at home. They may actually play well against the Mets because they do historically. But Kansas City's good. Kansas City's going to be fighting for a wild card spot too. So I don't know if they take advantage of that or not. I would love to see them take advantage of it. But I don't know if they do or not. Their offense has just been so inconsistent. And it's killing them because they've had some amazing starts from their starters this year. After tonight, I'm sure they probably have the 2nd best ERA in the league. But still, if you have the 2nd best ERA in the league, you should have a lot more wins. Just 81 wins. Now, granted, with all the injuries they've had this year, it's amazing that they're even going to be a 500 team. But they're still in the race. It sounds horrible, but it could be worse because they could be playing 4 postseason teams in the series or in the year instead of just the Mets and Kansas City. So it's going to be a wild ride the next 2.5 weeks or so. I hope they make it in. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't, though. I mean, I love my team, but and also too, it's probably not the worst thing that can happen because then you get Ozzy Albies a full offseason of rest, Ronald Acuna a full offseason of rest, Austin Riley a full offseason of rest, Sean Murphy. Basically, every guy that's a starter that has been on the IL except Matt Olson and Marcell Ozuna will get a full offseason to rest. So it's literally not the worst thing that can happen. They'll come back refreshed in 2025 and probably hit 250 home runs again. So that's kind of how I look at it. I think overall, I still think that San Diego ends up winning or gets that top wild card spot. I am very interested to see how they play against the Dodgers, though, and if that series matters, because overall they're not that far behind the Dodgers. That series could actually be very interesting because wouldn't the national media just melt if San Diego goes on this hot streak and ends up beating the Dodgers in 3 games, and all of a sudden, those last 3 games for the Dodgers of the season matter? I mean, to me, that would just be wild. I don't know. I don't think that happens, but man, that would be a crazy storyline to see. So,
Yep. And speaking of the Padres, they actually just went up 1-0 on the Astros. Arrighetti has given up 2 straight doubles to start off the first inning. Actually, with 2 outs in the first inning, but he's given up 2 doubles to Jerickson Profar, and then Manny Machado followed up and drove him in with another 2-out double. So
right.
The Padres are hot. I believe they lead the league in on base and slug. So, or they're like one of the top teams in the league in both of those categories. So they're a really good team. They're not to be trifled with, and I do think that it is a possibility that they can knock the Dodgers off and one of the final series of the season. I think that would be crazy, and yeah, I that would be very Dodgers-esque of them if they were to do that.
Well, Joe, I talked a little bit about the idea that Whit Merrifield is kind of a spark plug and he can do several different things, including the bunt. We said earlier that we wanted to go and revisit that loss that the Astros had against the A's, where in the top of the inning, the A's laid down 3 straight bunts, and they ended up scoring 2 runs because the Astros looked like little leaguers and did not know how to defend the bunt. I want to get your take on it, and then I'll give you my take on it.
Yeah, so it was the top of the 12th in the first game of the 3-game series that the Astros recently had against the Athletics, and yeah, the A's, I mean, just straight up bunted 3 times in a row. The first one was a bunt single. The second one was ruled a sacrifice, and Hector Neris made a throwing error on that. And then the third one was a fielder's choice that scored a run. Yeah, it was really bad. It was a really bad defensive play by the Astros, as I mentioned earlier, who have been playing really bad defense, which is, as I said, been one of their staples over the last 7 years, is playing like really solid defense. And, the thing that really gets me is, like, the Astros saw that take place. They saw 3 straight bunts be effective in extra innings. And then they go out and they don't convert on, scoring a run that way. So the Astros followed up. Altuve hit a leadoff double, and Jason Hayward immediately scored, and Altuve replaced him on second base. And now I get it. You have Yordan Alvarez coming up to bat. You have Kyle Tucker, and you have Alex Bregman. And you're saying to yourself, that seems like a good 3 that can either walk it off with a 2-run home run or tie the game with a single, with Altuve on second already and no outs. But statistically speaking, they are all likely to not get on base. Like, that's just statistics of the game. You should play selflessly and lay a bunt down. I get it. The bunt isn't pretty. I have my own opinions about the bunt, but it can be effective. Now, I also see the argument that a lot of people make saying that bunting is very hard. Hitting a baseball is probably one of the hardest things to do in general. And when you have a fastball with some tail on it, coming in at 98 miles per hour to 100 miles per hour because this is a high leverage, pitcher coming in the game in the bottom of the 12th. They are usually all high octane and all throw gas. It's not always the easiest to even square up a bunt. And then you factor in breaking pitches and off-speed pitches to go along with that. And pitchers can sequence differently. And if they think a bunt is coming, they could throw the nastiest curveball on the planet and miss your barrel that way. Even bunting. It's all situational. But the Astros' lack of ability to even move a runner over in those extra innings, historically since 2020, has frustrated the hell out of me. I think that is probably the one thing they do not do well as an organization, or have done well since this golden era. I think that that has been their biggest weakness, is moving the runner over in extra innings, which sounds absurd because it is. I don't understand how they constantly do it. I don't understand how they've been this successful for this long and have failed to master that. Because I see other teams do it, and I'm like, you just hit a ground ball onto the right side of the infield to the second baseman. You have a free run there. All you have to do is basically put the ball in play for the second out or the second batter of the inning, and you've got a free run. And the Astros just failed to do that. They're probably one of the worst teams in the league in extra innings since Manfred Ball 2020 came out. I would really like to look at all of the teams combined and see what their record is. But yeah, they've got to be up there with one of the worst teams in extra innings since 2020, which is really frustrating because, as I mentioned, they historically are really good at putting bat to ball. But it seems like in those situations, they are historically bad at putting bat to ball and just moving a runner over selflessly.
I know a couple of years ago, there was some research that came out that talked about, is bunting worth it or not, basically. And basically what it showed, it went through an entire baseball season. I don't remember if it was like maybe 2018 or so, somewhere in that time frame, maybe 2016, somewhere in there. Anyway, well, they only found one situation where bunting was actually a better option than swinging it. And so to me, that like kind of killed bunting for the big leagues. And now what we've seen since then, Joe, is we have seen pitchers and guys playing the corners that have no idea how to defend that. Because it's not something that's being done ever at all. So to me, it's so weird because take somebody like Yordan Alvarez. Okay, when Yordan comes up, everybody plays back. Everybody moves slightly towards right field in whatever capacity, whether you're short, moving over towards towards like center, or if you're third, moving over towards short. There is some kind of a shift on for him. I have seen Yordan struggle at the plate to get a hit and lay down a bunt down the third baseline, and quite frankly, it's beautiful. He has done it before.
It is.
And he's good at it. I don't know why some of these guys feel like swinging it is a better option. Yordan is probably the one exception where I would probably let him swing away regardless. But for him, like, that works because they always shift him. There's never anybody close to him.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, Joe, is okay, if I'm a reliever coming into the game, I got to be able to do a couple things extremely well. First of all, I've got to be able to defend my position, because what the A's figured out with Neris is that he could not defend that stupid thing to save his life. So why not keep doing it?
Yeah.
Okay. Second thing,
that's why they did it 3 straight times. Yeah.
Yes, and second thing, if I'm a reliever, I better be able to throw my breaking pitches for a strike, because if I see so and so square around, maybe I'm gonna bring it in just a little bit, not hit them, but bring it in so they can't get that bunt down. But if I can't throw my breaking stuff for a strike that can maybe get them to pop up, well, guess what? they're going to pull that bat back, they're going to spit on it, and then guess what they're sitting on? They're waiting on the fastball because I just told them that I can't throw the breaking ball for a strike. If I'm a reliever and I can't throw the slider right off the plate or right on a corner, or maybe a backdoor slider, guess what? That pitch is basically useless. Unless you got somebody like Jeremy Pena who swings at sliders 8 inches off the plate. So you better be able to throw your off speed for a strike, especially with guys that want to bunt. But then also, too, if I am so-and-so pitcher and I throw 97, well, that's all fine and dandy, Joe. But what we've seen lately with a lot of relievers is they've got gas and they've got no command. And gas and no command means nothing because anybody can make it throwing 95. Anybody can get to the big leagues throwing hard. But the guys that can stick around are the guys that can actually command that pitch. Roger Clemens used to say that the best pitch was a well-placed fastball. And I agree 100% because just last night I was watching the Braves game and I saw Charlie Morton throw this fastball at like 94 or 96 on the inside part to Shohei Ohtani for strike 3. And Joe, it was wonderful. I don't know if that's where he meant to throw it, but I was like, that's a perfectly pitched ball. Like there is nothing better he could have done in that situation because it looked like it was going to be a ball. It tails right in, and it's a strike. So for me, it's wild that we are living in a time where guys don't have command of pitches. They just throw everything extremely hard. Honestly, I would love to see where somebody like Bonds would play now because I have this feeling that Bonds may take like 350 walks because nobody can actually throw him a strike. Like they would try to hit a spot and it would be 6 inches off the plate and he would take 4 straight balls, not even an intentional walk because nobody can hit a spot. And then we've all seen the Gagne at bat that he had against them. He took 99 deep. So obviously velocity wasn't what was going to keep him down. Nothing really kept him down. He wasn't a K victim. He always had a great eye. Steroids can't teach you those two things. So I just the game that we live in right now, Joe, is really exciting because it's a ton of power. It's a ton of I throw really hard, you hit the ball really hard, but there's not a lot of skill in the game. There's not a lot of situational awareness in the game. There's not a lot of let's hit behind the runner in this at bat, or let's put one in a gap. To me, it's those teams that can do that well that I enjoy watching because it's such a different brand. Like that's why I really like watching like the Royals because they hit so well from the scoring position. I like watching the Diamondbacks because they've got so much speed, you know. And another thing too, Joe, is if you're a team that has a catcher that can't throw, or you've got pitchers that are slow to the plate, and you're playing a team that has good speed, it's about to be a track meet on the bases. Like they are going to absolutely dust you. So if you're a reliever, you better be quick to the plate too, especially in those situations because otherwise you're about to have one or maybe two guys in scoring position off 3 pitches, especially if you're slow to the plate. So to me, it is such a different time that we live in. I love baseball, but boy, there's some things that frustrate me. And I sent you the Chipper Jones clip the other day. That is a Hall of Famer with a 300, 400, 500 slash line that straight up told you that he was frustrated working with the Braves because of their approach. Now, granted, this is a team last year that tied the record with 307 home runs. Well, guess what? Those didn't happen in October, and what were you left with? You took an L to the Phillies and you went home. No situational hitting, especially when it cools off a little bit and it's cold in Philly and the home runs aren't flying. You know, I know that the data is out there about, you know, the team that hits more home runs typically wins the series in a postseason series. But I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's so frustrating sometimes, you know, strictly relying on the long ball. You know, strictly relying on the slug in general. I don't know. I know it's a recipe for success a lot of times, but man, it's a roller coaster. It is truly a roller coaster because you're either extremely high or you're at rock bottom. Because if you're not hitting homers, uh, boy, you're not scoring. And right now, what we've seen with the Braves is they haven't hit a home run, I think, in 2 games now. And guess what? They had 2 runs last night, and they got shut out tonight. So that tells you everything you need to know. So just such a different game. I don't know if it ever changes. I know that we've kind of talked about this before, but it's going to be interesting to see. Especially with who goes far in the postseason this year. We saw 2 completely different teams make it to the World Series last year. We saw the Rangers with a lot of slug. We saw the Diamondbacks with a lot of speed and contact. Um, Totally different ends of the spectrum. So I'm not sure what it's going to look like this year. I mean, you could tell me that 2 teams right now are going to make the World Series, and I'd probably believe you because I still feel like overall there's so many teams that have every team that is going to make the postseason has a hole, whether it's the bullpen, the starting rotation, or the offense. No, there's not one team that has a really good or great all three. They're just it's not there. It's not there.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned, Chipper Jones and that video that you sent with him, voicing his frustration. And, I sent you my rebuttal to his opinion, and I don't know how you really took it, but I found it kind of interesting. I wasn't able to find the tweet, but I saw a tweet that highlighted the fact that the average fastball velocity in the 90s was about 95 to 96, maybe even 94. And hitters in the MLB right now are hitting around 500 on fastballs that are 94 miles per hour, which could be a really big contributing factor as to why a lot of the game is now predicated on how hard you can throw instead of where you can throw it, because that was 95 or 94 miles per hour anywhere in the zone, not just down the middle. It was anywhere in the zone, which is an absurd stat. um and so it just really goes to show how much hitting has advanced um over the last 2 decades at least. um, but at the same time, you can kind of say that it's also regressed because, as you said, it seems like a lot of the skill has just gone away. And I think a lot of it has to do with, guys wanting those big, shiny, triple crown numbers, the slug, the on base percentage, and then the batting
That's
average. They want all 3 of those to be as high as possible, but mainly the slug and the on base. And they care very little about the batting average now. And I don't want to sound like a boomer. Like, I understand the importance of these stats. I do. It's just sometimes it's frustrating. And watching the Astros over this era is going to sound really stupid, but they have been one of the teams that hit into the most double plays over the last 8 years. And it's because while they put the ball in play, they aren't necessarily taking the greatest swings. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just frustrating. It's kind of like, I kind of see why a lot of teams like go for the boom or the bust, because when you have the Astros who are getting runners on at an insane clip, but then are constantly hitting into double plays because they're focusing more on that contact and not trying to absolutely crush a pitch into the outfield. They lose opportunities by erasing them on the base paths by grounding out into double plays. But I also think that with a runner on second and no outs, you have got to play selfless baseball. You have got to be able to hit the runner over. You've got to be able to hit a ball to the opposite field if you're a right-handed batter, or if you're a left-handed batter, you got to be able to pull the ball to the first baseman or the second baseman to move that runner over. And then with 1 out, you got to be able to hit the ball into the outfield. You just have to. You have got to be able to elevate the ball and get it far enough to where the runner has a legit shot to score. It is so frustrating. The Astros have been, as I said earlier, it has seemed like they've been one of the worst teams in the league with runners in scoring position. I know that that's not the case, But my God, it is so frustrating. They go night in and night out, leaving 10 guys on. I don't know how many times I have come on this podcast and said the Astros left 10 runners in scoring position or 8 runners in scoring position with like they were 1 for 8 or 1 for 10 or 2 for 12. And it is just the most infuriating thing in the world because they get on base and then they do nothing with it because, as you mentioned, their situational hitting is trash. They kind of seem like they play a very selfish brand of baseball, but I don't know. I understand what you're saying. I understand what Chipper is saying, but I also understand that the stats are the stats and they are that way for a reason. They just didn't, come about magically. This is a trend that's been going on. Hopefully, instead of the two extremes, we can see some regression to the mean where we kind of go back to a more balanced approach when it comes to how teams look at offense in the MLB. But right now, it's all boom or bust. And as you mentioned, it is frustrating to watch sometimes. And it's just the game that we live in right now. But, maybe with these baseballs being different every year, we kind of start to see teams adjust to that and adjust to the fact that the balls might not fly as much anymore. So we kind of do have to go back to that mean and play a more balanced game. We'll see.
You were talking. You were talking about the Astros and their difficulties with runners in scoring position. Let me share with you the stat line from the Braves game that just ended a little bit ago. Okay, the Braves got beat 9-0. Okay, they got shut out. All right. The Braves had 4 hits. You want to guess how many hits the Dodgers had, Joe?
I'm gonna say 8.
They had 4 hits. 4 hits. They both had 3
Oh
hits.
wow.
The Braves had 7. The Braves walked 7 guys tonight. Okay. Now let me share this with you. Okay. The Dodgers with runners in scoring position tonight went 3 for 7, which wins you a lot of baseball games. Okay. The Braves tonight went 0 for 12. 0 for 12.
Yeah, I mean that's
My God, that's awful. That is unacceptable as a big league club. I don't know how you are considering yourself a big league club going 0 for 12 runners in scoring position. Somebody laid down a bunt. Somebody hit behind the runner. Somebody pushed one. Somebody hit a sac fly to center. I mean, my God, is that frustrating. They left 7 guys on base. Guess what? If all those guys score, that's a close ball game. Even if half of them score, that changes the dynamic because then you go to a different bullpen arm in the 7th. So anyway, rant over. It's just unreal that they both had 4 hits and one team scored 9 runs and one team scored absolutely 0. So do with that what you will. That's another anomaly from this Braves. They've had the most oddball crap happen to them all year long. So anyway, what else did you want to talk about tonight, Joe?
Well, I did want to mention, I failed to mention this in my Astros talk, but someone returned. It was Kyle Tucker. He came back from injury. He's played in a bunch of games at this point. I don't know the number. The last 3 weeks have been a whirlwind for me. But he's been back. But I don't want to talk about him since he's been back. I want to talk about what we learned while he was still injured. And boy, oh boy, was it no surprise to literally anybody with a brain. Yeah, so Kyle Tucker did have a fracture in his leg. Surprise to nobody. It came out like 4 or 5 days before he came back and returned to the team. He had a press conference with the media, which I believe was one of the first times he was made available since his injury. And he basically explained that after the inflammation in his shin went down, they found a small fracture. And I think it's absolutely insane that happened because he was off of crutches and in a walking boot after 3 days from that injury. And if you know anything about a shin fracture, obviously it is a very that bone is load bearing. It is one of the most load bearing bones in your body. Um, you're not supposed to walk on it for like 3 to 6 weeks with a fracture. He was walking within like 3 to 5 days. So it is no surprise that his recovery took a little more time than it probably should have. Because the Astros just absolutely fumbled with his recovery process, which you can kind of say they have done to every player that has been injured this season. You can point to Christian Javier, Jose Urquidy, JP France, Luis Garcia, Lance McCullers. All 5 of those guys that I just mentioned had reoccurring injuries sometime this season. And it is something that James Click, before he was fired, and I'm going to keep saying this, before he was fired, was trying to fix. When they rushed Jake Meyers' injury and return from injury in 2022, and he played awful, and it was very apparent that he was not ready. He was not mentally ready. He was not physically ready to return. He came out and said that the Astros, he as the GM was going to look into the Astros' internal return to play policy, and he was going to revamp it because there was obviously something there that was not working. Now, what do you see this year? 5 guys that had repeat injuries. Jose Urquidy had shoulder injury at the beginning of the off season, or sorry, at the beginning of spring training, and then it was like a month into the regular season, he's having forearm injury. JP France, the same exact story. Justin Verlander had 2 different injuries to start the year and then in the middle of the year. Christian Javier has neck discomfort 1 week and then is down with Tommy John 3 weeks later. Luis Garcia recovering from Tommy John surgery. We hear all offseason that he's been progressing faster than usual. And he's ahead of schedule. And then he shut down for the remainder of the year to get ready for 2025 because he had another setback. Lance McCullers Jr. hasn't pitched since the World Series of 2022. Is that not insane? Like, what are these players doing on their rehab assignments that they are getting re-injured at an insane rate? Penn Mumphrey, a guy that the Astros signed over the offseason, who they knew was going to be injured for a good majority of the season, had a rehab start, or had a rehab appearance, and immediately after pitched horribly, first of all, and then second of all, had to be reevaluated for an injury because he re-injured his already injured arm. It's like, what is happening inside the Astros organization where their return to play policy is going so horribly that they have had 5 to 6 pitchers all be shut down for the remainder of the season, all pitchers that you were kind of relying on, might I add, to come back at some point during the season to help this team push for a postseason and potential World Series, and they're all shut down mysteriously after having a setback or another injury. It's just insane to me. I started off this whole rant with Kyle Tucker, talking about Kyle Tucker. He was running on a treadmill. I believe it was like 2 weeks after he was walking on a boot. It's just, what was going on where he was not progressing and they just said, whatever, he's fine. We're not going to take a look at him. We're not going to shut him down. We're just going to keep letting him run on it and keep, obviously he was in some sort of pain because he didn't come back for 3 months. He was out for 3 months. So I don't understand what that medical staff is doing. It is infuriating because once again, it was something that James Click was going to address, but when he was forced out of the organization, he was unable to address it. Things haven't changed, and Dana Brown refused to acknowledge any problem with it. When he went on the talk show after the news came out about Kyle Tucker and his fractured shin. That's infuriating as well because obviously there needs to be a change, and the Astros are just going to refuse to do anything about it as an organization.
I have 2 thoughts on that, Joe. First of all, it's really frustrating that the Astros have had all of these injuries and or reoccurring injuries when they live in arguably the best medical facility or the best medical city in the entire world, being Houston. Okay, that's frustrating in itself.
It's ironic.
Second thing, I am also curious. Um, did James Click have dirt on the medical staff, and that's why he got run off? Because he was going to expose them. Now that would make for a wild story, because if he already wanted to have a review of their policies, it makes you wonder what else he actually also knew. Because that's obviously just a brief synopsis of what he wanted to do, but I guarantee you they were probably all going to be under some kind of investigation and or scrutiny to figure out to get to the bottom of what was going on. Um, so that would be a wild story if Chandler Rome wants to dive into that one. I would love to see that, and wonder why it never came to fruition. Because there's no reason that these guys should have been injured and or re-injured with the same thing. They shouldn't have been allowed to come back unless they knew for sure that that wasn't going to happen. Or who gave the okay to have Tucker out of the boot 3 days later, running on a treadmill within 2 weeks, on what was what turned out to be a fracture in his shin? I don't know who okayed that. You don't have to be a doctor to realize that that's just stupid. That is outrageous. And honestly, Joe, I hope for Tucker's sake that it is actually healed now. But quite frankly, I can't count on it. How do we know it's actually healed now? Is it actually healed now? That's what I want to know. And I'm worried for Tucker's future that it's still not healed properly. He still doesn't look the same running. It's to me, it's a very scary situation for their players and their health. What if they have a guy that has a concussion? They're gonna bring that guy back out like they did Rizzo? They're gonna screw that guy too? That's actually scary stuff. So I am concerned for their safety and their well being as players. So just ridiculous things.
Yeah, and to your point about Click, I don't think he wasn't let go because of anything that had to do with the medical review. It was purely because Dusty Baker hated him. He hated the way he operated, and Dusty Baker had the ear of Jim Crane, and in turn, Jim Crane didn't like him. Now, it probably didn't help his case that he wanted to ruffle some feathers in the organization, going through that review process and exposing some of the deficiencies inside the Astros organization. But it was purely because Dusty Baker did not like the way that he operated as a general manager, and it's really asinine for in my opinion. But we are here now, so can't really do much about it now.
Click loved to ruffle the feathers, and boy, was that a great quality that he had. Not afraid to stand up for what he believed was right for not only the player but also the organization. And that's what you want a GM, because Click was looking years into the future by going to get Diaz.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that may go down as one of the trades in Astros history.
But at the time, that was one of the most controversial trades in Astros history. You took away the starting center fielder for one of the best teams in baseball at the time, and you replaced him with a relief pitcher and a prospect catcher. But anybody who actually could take a look and wasn't so laser-eyed focused on in the Miles Straw fan club could see that, first of all, Miles Straw was not good. Jake Myers and Chas McCormick had both been playing extremely well in the minors at the time, and they were being held up by someone who only played like good defense. And when Jake Myers came up, he hit extremely well, and then Chas McCormick subsequently followed up and also played very well in the same season, and people were still upset. It's like James Click was thinking years ahead, and Dusty Baker had tunnel vision and could not see the grand scheme, and it really frustrated me. It still frustrates me to this day. Obviously, I will not get over it. I don't care. The Astros are currently in the situation they are in because of it, and I'm not saying it's not a good situation to be in, but honestly, in my opinion, it really could be better. It could be better.
I mean, can you imagine what?
Just saying.
Can you imagine what Click could have done? Maybe Click would have been the one to go out and get Chris Sale. Maybe he would have taken that chance because they could have used a no-name prospect and gotten Chris Sale. If they would have had Chris Sale this year, they'd probably have 93, 94 wins right now easily. And Click wouldn't have given away anybody.
Yep.
Or he would have given away some no-name that would have turned into nothing.
Yeah.
So it's wild to think about what could have been with Click. So it's I don't know, just crazy times. Is there anything else we want to discuss? We discussed the NL wild card. We discussed both of our teams. We discussed Chris Sale being just amazing. The Astros medical staff, and the fact that they maybe have no idea what they're doing, even though neither one of us are doctors.
Yeah.
Other than that, go ahead.
I have breaking news. Spencer Arguetti strikes out Luis Arias, snapping 141 consecutive plate appearances without striking out for Luis Arias. So, breaking news. Sound the alarms.
Can I just say this, Joe? Going 141 plate appearances without a strikeout is extremely impressive. I don't care if you're in...
Very impressive, yes.
I don't care if you're in high school. I know when I was a junior in high school, I went like 15 or 16 games without a K, which does not turn out to be 141 plate appearances, by the way. That was probably 60 at-bats, maybe 70 at-bats. But literally, to go 141 plate appearances without a K, to me, is incredible. This is another guy that I enjoy watching is Luis Arias because he does things so much different. He knows his strengths. He plays to them. And he's fun to watch. He's cool. And he works extremely hard at it too. He's not Tony Gwynn. There will never be another Tony Gwynn. But he's very talented.
Yeah.
But
he is. Yeah, as you mentioned, that is impressive. Yeah, I can't imagine being able to have that much bat to ball skill, and being able to do that for that sustained amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe, it's been a fantastic podcast. I'm so glad that we've been back tonight. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I love getting on YouTube and seeing all the support, seeing all of our views go up. If you haven't liked, shared, or subscribed to our YouTube channel, the Throwing Partners Podcast, please do that. That really helps the show. Joe, we're only 2 subscribers away from 50, which is great. So thank you, everybody, for the support there. Also, too, please remember that we are now on Apple Podcasts as well. You can listen to us while you're at the gym or maybe on your way to work or whatever you're doing. Feel free to listen to us on there. And then also the 5-star review on there also helps the show. That helps, it helps us get more seen by a bigger audience. So thank you, everybody, for your support. We love and appreciate it. I'm hoping when the off season comes and I've got a little more downtime, that maybe I can get some hats to some people that were interested. I still need to get Joe a replacement patch because the United States Postal Service sucks. And then we will go from there. So thank you, everybody, for the support. It's good to be back with Joe, and we will see you next Monday. Have a great night.